guess you never sort of lose. You win or you learn, which is a quote from a football player I admire. It's that sort of mindset. Things that have happened in my past that haven't been great, but let's move on and let's keep going and let's use that to sort of keep driving.
Hi, welcome back to the Get Stuff Done podcast. It's time to get stuff done. Today, I'm joined by Damian Madden. He is currently the Director of Consumer Experience and Digital Transformation at Pernod Ricard, but has led a career across the CXO area of business. He has worked for a number of global brands, and I've actually been able to have him as a guest previously, many moons ago, which I think we can talk about later on. He's also co-founded a gallery space where he is speaking to us from today. He graduated from Macquarie University in media and journalism, and he has also recently won the award for CXO of the Year in Australia. So he's both recognized internally and externally by the industry as one of the leading members of his field. So I'm really glad to have him on the podcast today. Damian, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Gordon. It's really lovely to be here.
So tell me a little bit, people maybe if they are not so familiar with the exact title of CXO, what does that entail for you and in your current role?
I think that, look, it's a very new sort of skill. It's a very new job title. And it kind of has come about because consumers are more valuing of experiences now than ever before. I think certainly during COVID, we were reminded of the fact that we love getting out, we love connecting with people, we love more than just the product itself, more than just what we're buying. We want something bigger. We want to connect to something, whether that's our friends, our family, whether it's art or other sorts of events. We want something bigger. And that sort of tangible experience when you walk into a space or a store that sort of resonates with you on a deeper, more emotional level, that's become a lot more important to people. So the role of a CXO is around making sure that there's definitely a through line between all the different touch points, because now people can engage with you online, in the real world, in various different forms. And you need to make sure that there's a consistency throughout that, a consistency of brand, of messaging, and of overall experience, so that from the consumer's point of view, it's holistic. So that's really what this role is about. It's about identifying those opportunities along that whole interaction chain with the consumer, around that whole ecosystem, and finding those opportunities to really sort of add value to them and sort of help a business shift from a traditional view, which is very value extraction based, to more value exchange. What can I identify from our consumer that really resonates with them, and then how can we deliver that, which in turn gives them a really good experience overall.
Okay. And so I guess there are certain businesses within certain industries which are fully on board with this. They it's really their competitive edge. It's something that they're doing through the DNA of the organization. And then there's some other organizations, perhaps more traditional ones, maybe certain industries as a whole are not yet there, because I'm sure it's very much at the intersection of online and offline with regards to that customer experience. So does that present a very unique challenge for you as a CXO?
It does, actually, and you're quite right. Businesses tend to view CX as one of two ways. They either view it as the experience of people when they're interacting with your brand, and you tend to find a lot of CX roles traditionally have been in the customer service space, making sure that someone who's in your coming into your shop or complaining or got some problems, that is dealt with efficiently and effectively and in a way that sort of keeps them as consumers. That's right. The traditional view of CX. But what it's evolving to is much more around how do you create experiences and value add. So I think in very traditional businesses like, say, banking or finance or insurance, CX is still very much rooted in that sort of internal view. Once you come into our ecosystem, we're going to make it easy for you to renew your insurance, or easy for you to take out a loan, or whatever that process is. It's making that really efficient. Whereas I think there's other industries, more creative industries, perhaps fashion, retail, those kind of industries where they're seeing the opportunities to do all of that to make a great experience when someone's coming in to do a return or an exchange, but then also extending that out to create these brand experiences that really move people. And so I think that the shift or the challenge for CXOs has been how do you sort of take that more traditional view of customer service only, which is very inward facing, and realize that, look, your consumers have a life outside of just what they do with you. So how can you sort of broaden that out? And that's been where I've had most of my sort of wins and sort of in helping to transform the industry to be more outward looking, to focus more on those experiences with customers in the broader world that can sort of really add
Mm.
value to their perceptions and interactions.
Okay. Okay. And was this something that you felt? I mean, so if we skip back 10, 15 years ago, when we were kind of earlier in our careers, and it wasn't such a well developed space, maybe even the job titles weren't very tangibly indicated as such. Was that at that point then something that you saw was kind of evolving, and you wanted to really pursue that, and or was it something that rather than seeing that it was coming, was it more something that you felt was needed, and therefore you kind of tried to actually create it?
I think I saw that it was coming. I mean, I started in digital and very much on sort of like I have a creative background, but I definitely started my career in the digital realm and working on that sort of intersection between digital and design and creative and tech and development. And then as I noticed the power of these tools to really kind of, well, actually, the way that these tools would become a part of someone's life and the way that when you consider their experience, where they would be when they used a tool, for instance. So you might be creating an app for a bank and you're thinking, well, look, is someone going to do this on the bus or is someone going to access this, when they're lying on the couch watching television, and just thinking about how their life is sort of operating and when they're going to be using this and at what touch points are they going to be doing it, and then designing the product for those moments. You sort of started to see these opportunities where, hey, like I can reach out into their lives and make them these experiences more valuable for them. And then as sort of my career and my interests definitely sit more on the creative and sort of luxury side. And as I worked more in luxury retail and luxury experience, I saw the ability of these to transform the way that people sort of felt and thought about a space. And then as my career sort of evolved from there, I've become much more interested in the strategic side of things. How do you really sort of utilize these techniques and how do you create experiences for people, and how do you sort of use that for them to sort of, I guess, hack their own lives and sort of create new ways to create experiences for themselves, almost like they're treating themselves as their own brand. And I've sort of been interested into moving to much more of a direct focus on the individual and how I can use these CX skills and these CX mindsets to help people in their lives. Has been the sort of the evolution of my career and where I'm interested in going
Okay.
forward.
Okay. Okay. So when we say, how the consumer feels about it, and we talk about experience, you mentioned about how creative industries, maybe are tending more to this. So that tells me very much about it being offline and about very much the tangible experience, but actually with so much of this field being online, where there's obviously a huge amount of data analytics available and ability to make it much more strategic, like you said. Tell me a little bit about that kind of intersection, and how you're kind of using data to try to inform
Yeah.
that offline experience.
I think that if you just consider the way that you use your devices, like they've become an integral part of your day to day life, and you don't think twice about opening a map or an app to interact with a store or use it to pay for something. It's almost become instinctual in a way for a lot of people. And I do a lot of work on with brands that are interested in younger generations and next generation consumers. And I think that there's a really big shift when you look at sort of cohorts who might be in their early 20s, who have effectively grown up with the technology. They don't necessarily see it in the same way as someone in their late 30s or 40s would see it, who knew life very much beforehand and actually has to be more active in their interaction with a digital device. It's much more intrinsic to sort of to blend the two together. And if anything, that sort of gives more sort of weight to real physical experiences. And if you can sort of make it efficient and make it easy to do and easy to transact and put all the stuff into digital that makes life easier to do it quickly, but then add in that element of physical real world difference to someone's experience, and you'll get a great result in terms of that sort of the blending of the two. And I think that,
Okay.
yeah, with younger generation consumers, that's particularly relevant. Like that real world collection is particularly important because they've grown up with a fully digitized world. And so that's why I think that most businesses, and even purely online businesses, you now see starting to open retail stores, or you start to see them opening pop-up experiences because they actually want to have that physical touch point. Because, I mean, there's data out there, and I can't remember the exact stat, but it's in the 70% range. About 75, 76% of younger consumers would prefer to buy their clothes in store. They they would at least like to touch them, feel them in store. They might transact online later, but they want to have that physical touch, and that's a much higher percentage figure than I think a lot of people would guess, given the way that
Yeah.
delivery and online retail works. But that it's true that younger consumers want to have that physical experience.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I mean, definitely product by product, service by service, we could expect a huge variation on that. I mean, if I think about banking right now, pretty much every experience I have in branch these days is just a painful experience,
Mm.
right? It's not very pleasant. It's not very efficient. Um, and I'm always thinking, God, I wish I could be doing this on the app.
Yeah.
But there's some things which are just not. So from what you explained there, that obviously that wealth of data that's out there, does that make this an easier job for larger organizations with bigger budgets and able to take advantage of that, or is that not really a correlation that exists?
I think that it certainly does. Having the bigger budgets and the more sort of consumer data that you can draw from is obviously helpful. And I think that what you're actually seeing now is a system called Voice of Consumer, or VOC. And businesses are starting to set up what they call VOC platforms, where they use that data to then infuse the business. They use those insights to then drive change and drive new products and new systems and new processes through the business. Because at the end of the day, all businesses have to become consumer centric. They have to shift from being product businesses to being consumer businesses, because that's how consumers now operate. It's not necessarily okay to just be product based. You have to be focused on the people who are going to buy your product. And so, as you see more and more of a businesses shift towards that, like banks, for instance, you're going to see much more of a focus on using these VOC platforms to drive that change through. You know, as a good example, I mean, you're based out of Seoul. I've been in banks in Seoul, and it is very much of that old school transactional experience. It's very much about the banking product that you're trying to do when you're in branch. Whereas if you look at banks over here, they've already done the transition to more consumer focus. So you walk in and they've got away with all their tellers. They still have the tellers, but they're hidden or disguised in different ways, and they sit at desks, not behind screens. And there's a concierge that welcomes everyone and directs you to the most efficient way. What are you trying to do? If you just want to deposit a check, you do that here, or you can do it there. And there's much more of that sort of
Right.
greeting. And so
Right.
I mean, they still don't have it right either way, and it's tricky in banking. I get it, but it's just those sort of models where it's like you talked about before, with your experience in walking to a bank and being frustrated and it being very difficult. You have to sit in the chair, and you get to walk up to a booth, and you might get to talk to someone, rather than walking in and someone kind of welcoming you and going, "Oh, hey, that's a bit of a wait today. Would you like a cup of coffee or whatever?" That sort of stuff starts to change how the brands are perceived, and it might not necessarily really change, so I help sign people up because it's really for existing consumers. But it's just that
Hmm.
nice feel that you start to get. And if you have all that data and you actually start to understand, hey, everyone wants to come into our branches, but they feel intimidated or they feel it takes too much time, you can start to put that data through. Then you can put it into your store design, or you can put it into the way that your products are set up, or basically the empowerment that you give to your frontline staff as to how many decisions, or what sort of, raise their decision making level a bit higher so that they can close better refunds or better deals or whatever. It starts to sort of infiltrate across your business. So I think that
Yeah.
businesses with have all that data and have the means to set up those VOC systems and then seriously integrate them. And there's some good case studies in Australia here of some prominent brands in industries like telco and banking who've effectively almost mandated VOC reporting on some of their products that they roll out, just to make sure that it's done beforehand, all the tests have been done, all the sort of research has been gathered, and whatever they're rolling out has come from a genuine customer or consumer insight. A consumer wants this. It's not just something that we sitting in head office reckon would be nice to have.
Mm. And being in a heavily regulated industry like you are now, does that make things? Does that? I'm thinking about your position within the organization and the amount of kind of free free space you get to do what you want to do. In regards to shaping the strategy, is that something that is a bigger opportunity for heavily regulated industries, or is it because it's heavily regulated, there's less space to do stuff and innovate?
There's probably more opportunity, I would say, I think, because being heavily regulated traditionally has made you, or potentially made you, somewhat hesitant to take certain risks, or you want to sort of double down. And yeah, we're heavily regulated, obviously, particularly around our advertising and how we talk to people. But we can sort of look at the ways that how people are shopping has changed. What are they looking for in their products? What are they asking for when they walk into the store? And how the sort of the for us how the general perception around wine and alcohol is changing amongst younger drinkers. And then actually for us, all of our regulations are about more healthy drinking and promoting sort of a wise choice around your drinking. So when you actually look at the way that consumers' drinking habits are changing towards that anyway, it's kind of, it works well. It goes hand in hand, because then it doesn't necessarily matter so much about the regulations, because we're conforming to them anyway, because that's what consumers want. It's not necessarily a sort of an opportunity for us to skate up against them, or there's no need for us to sort of try and disrupt them. And that's similar with banking. People want information, they want, or even insurance. People just want to sort of think about what they're actually going into the store for. And if you're talking about people's money or their health or their life and all that sort of stuff, it's obviously very important to them. So that's how that then allows you to sort of, I guess, utilize those regulations to be like safeguards, like, we're looking after you, we're protecting your money, we're protecting your interests, and then sort of feed that into your narrative as you create a better, more integrated experience for them.
Yeah. So obviously, as you know, I'm based in Korea, and when it comes to a lot of technology, Korea is actually a bit of a kind of unique melting pot of being, on the one hand, highly advanced, highly digitalized in some ways, and yet highly traditional, paper-based, offline in other ways. In your space, are you looking around the region, the globe, for this kind of best practice and trying to take those good examples? Do you have any kind of good cases around that?
Yeah, I think that you're quite right. Just the return to sort of that physicality and that tangibility is really important. I think if you're starting to talk about wine as a product has always been treated in the same way. And certainly when I walk into a wine store in Korea, and I'm there reasonably regularly, so I'll walk into a wine store there, and it's exactly the same as a wine store here. And the way that wines are categorized are the same, and it hasn't changed in 100 years. But if you talk to a drinker, what they're looking for has changed, and what they think about the product has changed. It's not necessarily liquid in a bottle anymore. It's a dinner with friends, or it's a romantic evening with your partner, or any of those kind of things are what you're looking for in that bottle. So you're picking something for something else. And we talk about talking through a product, not about it. So how do we look at going through the product and sort of tapping into that? What are you going to use it for? And I can talk to you about that. And then you can sort of look at how that can be applicable to multiple industries. But
Mm-hmm.
to answer your question, I certainly keep my eye on the region, certainly around APAC. I think there's a lot of really interesting, like in markets like Korea, which I do watch quite closely, because there is that interesting sort of back and forth between old school and more physical. If you look at the way that bookshops are presented in Korea, there's great, amazing big bookshops, and there's people always in them. Whereas if you look here, there's not as much in terms of the way of large physical bookstores. And so it's looking at that sort of desire to get together and sort of have communal moments of people coming together and experiencing art or books or technology or having a drink with your friends, like that desire for people to come together is pretty universal, and that's what we're finding. So it doesn't necessarily matter if I'm talking to someone in Seoul or Sydney, their desire for what they're buying that bottle of wine for is largely going to be the same, and it's very different to how it's been traditionally thought of.
Yeah, I was in a convenience store just the other day, and I saw, I think it was an Australian wine. I'm pretty sure, and it was in a bottle size which would be maybe even less than single serving, or at least a very small single serving. And I hadn't ever seen such a kind of product, a wine product packaged that. And I thought, wow, that's definitely a very much a specific certain use that consumer would have that for. But absolutely right to have that in a convenience store, right? That kind of convenience for that time, and it was so small and convenient in size that I thought, wow, I'd almost consider buying multiples of those just to have them,
Yeah.
maybe in my office or wherever, such that at that kind of sudden unexpected moment, when just that small quantity of wine would be appropriate, then yeah, and I thought, yeah, this I was thinking about how it could be applied into other areas. I mean, obviously the non-bottled wine, so like pouches or boxed wine, right? That has a very much certain reputations in different countries and levels of pricing points, etc., and a different kind of drinker perspective. And then again in Korea, I'm sure it's the same. Korea is the place where until recently alcohol was not really purchased with a brand choice, right? Much more of a functional type of consumption. But I think that's changing rapidly, and that's, I think, clear by the diversity of brands that are now available in retail stores. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that evolves over time.
You're right. And one of the great examples we see here, and it's similar in Korea, like wine has traditionally been associated with cellaring and aging and storage of wine, but most people don't have the physical space to store multiple bottles of wine. I mean, apartments are small. There's a lot of apartment living here. There's certainly a lot of apartment living in Seoul. So, where are you going to put two or three bottles of wine in a way that's going to maintain them physically, or make sure they don't get too warm or get ruined? So, but then wine is traditionally sold in a way like, oh, you want to put this down for 2 or 3 years, or people are sort of worried about, well, can I drink it now? But what we're finding is consumers are just, yeah, they want to drink it now. They want to understand it, and they don't have the space to keep it anyway. So they're not interested in any of that. Maybe not as interested in aged wine as we would have thought traditionally they would be. But yeah, you're right. So that's driven by circumstance. It's driven by the fact that we just don't have the physical space to store wine in a lot of the houses these days, nor the desire to keep large quantities of wine. People might have a wine fridge or something to store some of their prize bottles or their special bottles, but largely it's shifted towards drinking now. And then, like you said, with smarter consumption comes smarter portion sizes and more options, so you can enjoy different things more conveniently.
Yeah. And then, as you talked about there, the different pricing options, that draws me to the perception of wine lists in restaurants, where generally the most purchased bottle is the second least expensive. Um,
Yeah,
because it's you can't show to be picking the cheapest bottle,
yeah,
but most people don't necessarily know or want to take the time to really look at what else is available. So one notch up from that tends to be, and
that's
definitely
it.
consumer tendencies here in Korea will always default to what's the number one selling one, or what's the most popular. Like the recommended one is the one that is just way more than other places
Yeah,
taken, if you like, without an active choice. And I
yeah.
think that applies not just to wine, but many categories.
Yeah, and it's interesting with if you talk about the restaurant space. There's interesting things with wine lists in restaurant and the perceived value around. Well, this wine is very expensive in a restaurant, but it's perhaps less expensive in a store. And then people actually going out and getting a takeaway meal and buying a nice bottle of wine themselves and then bringing that into the home. I think we're seeing a rise of that around the world. I know that it definitely happens in Korea, and it certainly happens here. We'll go out and spend the extra money on a nicer bottle of wine because we're just getting some takeaway and we're going to go home and drink it. And have a sort of a family moment or a communal moment with your friends around the table. And you can actually say, well, look, this bottle only cost me $60, but it's $120 in the restaurant, and we're having a restaurant at home. And you can sort of start creating those nice experiences. And what we're actually finding is restaurants are becoming an entry point for a lot of people into fine wine. Sommeliers are sort of selling it in a new way. And it comes again with the whole experience. And I'm sure many people can relate to many products that you've bought because you had a really nice dinner and the food was really lovely and the company was really nice, and you tried the wine and you sort of took a photo of it, and you might have bought it later at another point. You're like, that wasn't so good because it wasn't tied to that really nice night that I had. And that just shows that power of that experience, because that sort of, it makes the wine taste better, or it makes the food taste better, or whatever your product is. It makes the clothes fit better, whatever. It's part of that overall experience. And then people are sort of starting to sort of realize that they can take elements of that and bring it into their lives in other ways, and they don't necessarily have to go to the restaurant for the nice meal. They can do that at home and recreate the same really nice convivial moment with their friends at home.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure that wines will be. I mean, the Coca-Cola Pepsi blind taste test is the classically known one. I think the same applies to wine, right? As well. That I think I saw a study where if it's a top end premium glass that it's served in, then the perception of the wine goes up, 10x or something, ridiculous.
Yeah, and then
it's
like
very
your
much
perception of flavour goes up if you're told how much it is before you drink it, even if you don't know anything about it. This is $100 wine must be good. This is $300 wine must be better. And you go into that mindset, which is, I mean, again, it shows the power of experience. If a shop looks expensive and you walk in, and then the pricing is maybe not as expensive, you're kind of like, oh, it's a bargain, like with no context at all, because that's just the way that they're wired, right?
for sure. And I think that's where expectations play such a heavy role in almost every purchasing decision. I was running a senior leadership team workshop yesterday, and we were doing a temperature check of where the organization is and where the leadership team is in relation to the organization. And they said that, overall perception was that things were okay, but with regards to how they were in relation to 6 months ago, significantly better. So it's an interesting difference that even if things are not good right now, if they're going in the right direction and we can see where we've come from, then we can absolutely be satisfied with this, perhaps outwardly, maybe compared to other groups, low score, and then that's where it comes in so heavily, I think. So tell me about some of your side projects. This is the Get Stuff Done podcast, and whilst you have a main, let's say, a traditional day job, you also have your hand in other things. I know that you're also a very keen photographer as well. But let's start about where you are sat right now today.
Yeah, so I think it all for me that there is. I do like getting stuff done. I think it's kind of wired into me that I always like to be doing things, and probably sometimes I'm doing too much stuff. And it all sort of extends from the same sort of set of creating experiences. So right now I'm sitting in the gallery that I run with my wife. It's called A Single Piece, and the whole concept around this is that we show a single piece of art at a time. And the idea is that we allow people to more deeply connect to the artists, their message and their story and what they want to convey through creating an experience inside the space that sort of adds to that single piece. So that there's a window and you can see the artwork on display in there. And then inside you see an experience that relates to that. And that could be a video work, it could be audio. In this case, it's related to the process of creating the art. And these are sort of working samples behind me. And it's about creating that environment where someone can sort of take a moment out of their day to come in and more deeply connect with art and an artist's message. And we promote artists of Asian heritage. My wife's from Korea. So we work on sort of bringing artists over from there and then from elsewhere across Asia and around Australia to show work and sort of allow people to sort of have a moment, have a quiet moment where they can sort of immerse themselves in art, because I'm a firm believer in the power of art to sort of really transform us, and I think that more people need to open themselves up to those kind of moments where they can sort of see beyond and see reach out into other things to connect with more. And again, that sort of comes to the experiential element of it, because it's been interesting running the space, because it's not like a physical retail store, and you have people who sometimes walk past and look in, and it'll be very intimidating because it'll have like a single video screen inside, and then they're not sure what it is. But then if they take the chance and come in and sit down and listen and just take a moment to sort of understand it, I mean, they don't have to like it, and I mean, art's purely subjective, but the whole concept is we just get it. If you just feel it for a moment, then that's my win. That's my desire. You can move on and go about your day. Because I think for me, like I talked about before, with experiences and the sort of the techniques that we use in creating experiences in the CX world, that can be quite powerful, because they can really transform your mindset in that brief moment where you'll go, oh, geez, I never saw something like that before. I never thought about something like that. And that can really change could change someone's life, which makes it sound very grand. But you can have those kind of experiences where someone's like, oh, that's really, I never saw it that way. Thank you. And then move on. So that's what we do here. We're looking at sort of, continuing that. And it's been very enjoyable so far. And I mean, outside of that, I'm working on a book related to a lot of the CX work that I do, and again, that use of those techniques in your sort of daily life, how you can sort of use the tips and tricks that I use on consumers to sort of kind of refocus your life and sort of jig how you see the world. And yeah, that's kind of my main sort of passions at the moment. I'm also working on a much longer project around youth mental health between Korea and Australia, which is very important to me. I obviously spend a lot of time there with my family, and just sort of looking at how young people see the world and interact with it, and a lot of the challenges they're faced with in terms of mental health and how they can deal with it, and how they can sort of share stories with each other to sort of let you know that you're not alone, or let you know that there's always another side to the story, and you're going to be able to get through whatever you're going through. So, and again, it sort of comes out through the experiential work, and it's related to that. And it's about, for me, it's about giving back. It's the same with the gallery. It's providing that space for the artists so that they can have their voice, or with the mental health project, it's combining fashion and streetwear, which is my background, to be able to allow people to express themselves in ways that they maybe can't do verbally, and help others through that. So that's kind of, they're all sort of tied in together, relating to helping people to get stuff done, I guess, to bring it back to our point.
What is it that drives you to get stuff done? You said at the start of that last answer that you love getting stuff done. What do you think it is that drives you to do so?
That's a good question. I think that, what else would you do, right? Like, for me, I look at it and I think, well, you've got to get stuff done. I think that we're only here for a limited time, and I don't necessarily, I've wasted plenty of time, like we all have, and sort of made decisions I've regretted in the past, and but they've all taught me something. And you kind of I guess you never sort of lose. You either you win or you learn, which is a quote from a football player I admire. It's that sort of mindset. Things that have happened in my past that haven't been great, but let's move on and let's keep going, and let's use that to sort of keep driving. I think if we keep learning, keep experiencing things, keep doing things, then we keep growing as people. So that's kind of my motivator to get stuff done, because I do see it as a way to keep learning and keep connecting. And I meet people all around the world, and I hear their stories, and I get to create these experiences for people too, which help people do small things and big things, and that's kind of the motivation for me to get
Yeah.
stuff done.
I think what you explained there is the reason why I admire you and the path that you've led, because I feel that there is a very high level of authenticity between the work that you do and the things which you're passionate about. So I think, in some sense, very fortunate that you have the work that is aligned, but at the same time, I'm high. I'm sure that you have also that's been an active choice, right, to kind of pursue that path. So for people who maybe who a lot of people don't have that, right? They have a job that they're just doing because it's a job,
Yeah.
or there's tons of people who love something but it just doesn't pay, and getting that intersection of the two can be a lifelong challenge that some people never do. Any Do you have any advice for people um, to try to achieve that
Yeah.
combination?
I mean, thanks. I mean, that's very kind things to say there. I look, I am lucky, and my day job is very much in the same sort of sphere as what I enjoy to do and what I am doing outside of work. But I think for a lot of people, it's about identifying what you're really passionate about, and what is it that allows you to feel like full in your heart, full in your life. That sort of, what is it that you do that allows you to feel that, and then really making it about that. I think traditionally we might define ourselves too much by our job, and it's the classic thing when someone says to you, what do you at a party? One of the first questions you'll get asked is, well, what do you do? Meaning, what do you? And the answer to that is traditionally like what you do for a job. But that's not actually the question they're asking when you think about it. So, like, what do you do? Like, I paint, or I draw, or I take photos, or I make clothes, or whatever. I do jigsaw puzzles, or I go hiking. Like, start talking
Right,
about those things that get you full as if they are your job, because
right.
what you might do to pay the bills and what you might do to fill up your life can be completely separate. However, we do tend to define ourselves too much by our jobs, and if you're in a job that isn't what you're passionate about, then there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. We can't all be in jobs that we absolutely love, and that's just not how it works. But your life is about something else. So I think it's maybe just looking at how you can separate that out. I mean, a lot of the stuff in the work that I do in all of my systems is around looking at patterns that we as humans fall into in our day-to-day lives. And we're very busy. We make ourselves busy. We always want to be doing stuff and just constantly feeling like we've got to be answering emails or on the phone or multitasking or doing all these things. And as a result, our bodies have sort of reacted by creating all these processes and systems that we run almost on autopilot. And you walk into a space and you won't look, you won't feel, you won't think, you won't see things. And so oftentimes, like, you'll look at your watch and you won't even check the time. You just look at it because you need to know the time. You realize a second later that you haven't actually registered what the time is, because we get on autopilot with all this stuff. And so we'll walk into an art gallery and we'll just walk around, take some photos and leave, and it hasn't left any resonance with you. So what I talk about with a lot of the people that I work with is, like, you have to find those moments where you can break it. And that's how you create experiences for people in, say, a retail space, because someone will just be walking past the store and they'll walk in and it could be a scent. And that's why you see a lot of scent being brought into retail design now, because all of a sudden you walk through the door and you're like, whoa, what's that smell? And for that 1 second where you're then broken in your sort of your process, then you're opened up to everything else around you. So that's kind of, if you can identify what you're doing or behaviors that you're doing that have become almost like rote or sort of, I guess, mechanical and almost autopilot behaviors, and you can find those opportunities to break them, then when you're doing that, you can then sort of like open it up to more things. It could be on your commute home, like maybe you'll walk a different section or a different way, or even put your socks on in a different order in the morning. Just those kind of little things that can sort of give you a different perspective on life is kind of what I encourage people to do, because that's how you'll unlock those moments that'll allow you to do the stuff that's really important to you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just fully taking everything in that you were saying there. I mean, I almost you almost touch upon the kind of classic Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, right? The dystopian, switched off, like you say, on autopilot. But that's so true. Is that we often, and I guess that's not what my Get Stuff Done project is about. It's not about trying to do as much as you possibly can. And I think when we look at career, there's absolutely a badge of honor by being as busy as you possibly can. How are you? Oh, I'm so busy.
Yeah.
oh, that's great, congratulations.
Mm.
Whereas, there can be different perceptions around being overly busy might actually be that you're not very good at what you're doing, and that's what's making you so busy. But also, of course, if you love what you're doing and you've filled yourself up,
Mm.
doing those things, then that's a totally different thing. It doesn't feel like work
Yeah.
because you love what you're doing. So I love what you mentioned there about breaking that,
Mm.
um, with different ways of doing that. I think that sometimes people can go for long periods of time,
Mm.
without breaking it, and I guess also it's even the concept of mindfulness, right? It being
Mm.
present in the moment. For me, I try to manage my notifications very
Mm.
carefully, when I'm working, because when I think about the communication channels that I'm using, right? It's WhatsApp, it's email, it's Kakao, it's text messages,
Mm.
it's LinkedIn, it's there's probably another half a dozen
Yeah.
in there as well, right? And some of them get through right to me, and I'm
Mm.
looking at that the second that it comes in.
Yeah.
And the others that I manage much more strenuously and maybe check once a day, twice a day,
Mm.
or even less. It is definitely a big challenge, I think, in the modern world
It's
to
a
do
huge
that.
challenge, and I think that we're seeing the negative impacts of that in terms of mental health issues, burnout in particular. Like those kind of issues come because all of a sudden we put our head down and think, I've got to be busy, or I need to keep doing stuff, I need to keep being connected, or keep checking, and those alerts go off, and it's really hard. I get it for people to constantly, to realize it, and to sort of not be on the phone, and that kind of then leads that real burnout feeling. Because you're right, it's all around the world that people wear busy as a badge of honor, but for no end. And I think that it sort of really struck home for me when I heard my kids, and they were about 3 and 5 at the time, using busy in their play because they'd heard me say it, and I was thinking that's not cool. It's not really, they're not really busy, but they've already got a sense of what that subject is, and I didn't like that, and that was part of when I sort of looked at how I could make this change. Because if you think about it, if you talk to a successful artist, or if you talk about someone who's really following their passion in life, you very rarely hear them say they're busy. And if they do say they're
Right.
busy, they're genuinely busy. Like they've got a range of meetings, or they're preparing for an exhibition or whatever. But if you talk to an office worker, they're like, oh, I'm so busy. And I'm like, yeah, you're not, because you work a 9 to 5, and you'll have much more time rather than someone who's all consumed in their passion, because it is who they are and what they do. And that's when you talk to people who are like, who say they're busy when they're probably not, or they shouldn't be. You're adding all of this extra stress and anxiety into your life that you don't need to. And you get it. You walk out in the streets, and I mean, I saw it last time I was in Seoul. I see it in Sydney, people rushing around, and it feels like I've got to get home to do this, and I've got to do this, and I've got to answer my emails, and I'll have to be online later just so people. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter, because I think in 20 years' time, when you look back on it, there's going to be no memory of what you were doing and why it was perceived to be so important. Because when you think about it, it's not. And so I think that's the real challenge. And it's obviously easier said than done. But if you can just start small, and hack those things, like set yourself a challenge, like don't look at your phone in any waiting situation, which is something I tested myself on. I'm like, so if I'm waiting for the bus, or if I'm waiting for a train, or if I'm waiting in a waiting room somewhere, I'm not going to use my phone. So and it just little things like that. So it's like, okay, so if I walk into a doctor's office and I'm sitting there, it's like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to read a magazine, or I'm going to read a pamphlet, or whatever else is around me while I wait. Because I think that otherwise you just get into this rote behavior of just like, I'll pull the phone out straight away. And obviously the phone as a device connects us up to so much potential busyness, or those alerts. And then you're thinking, oh, there's a message from Gordon there, I've got to get back to it. And it just kind of distracts you and makes
Yeah.
you think like you're busy. And that's I mean, it's a problem, and I don't like seeing it in the broader world.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And yeah, I think you've brought it even home to me. Often in that little brief moment of waiting time, Okay, check my notifications on that app. Check my notifications on that app. Check my notifications on that app. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Now, what do I really want to actually do? Like, what do I actually want to read or find out about?
Yeah.
It's a very easy, it's a very easy loop to get stuck in.
It can go on forever. Like literally, like you can all of a sudden get stuck in something, and you might have got an important email that you need to deal with, and then all of a sudden the whole bus ride home you're obsessed with doing this thing, and then, I mean, you think of the cliche of stopping and smelling the flowers, and I mean, no one does that. You don't look up, you don't notice the color of the sky, you don't notice the person walking past you. Like it's just like zero focus on your own sort of internal busy world, and
Yeah.
then it's just not sustainable. Like literally.
I think what I'm really grateful for is the awareness that my kids give me of stopping and smelling the flowers, like almost literally, in a short walk, maybe from your front door to the first junction where you've got to cross the road, and maybe it's 50 meters, and maybe you already look to that crossing about when's it going to be green. So if it's about to turn green, you're gonna run and make it to save time, to be as fast as you can. But then if I'm with my kids, and then we're stopping and looking at every single thing along the way,
Yeah.
right? The tree which has a bug on it, the unusual pavement tile which is cracked and you can actually see the ground underneath, right? I mean, it can be so many things, and 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 then I realize I'm always just missing these things. I'm not saying that they're important things, but it's like you say, it's that always being on autopilot. I think can sometimes, because then what people are always saying, oh, how time's flying, right?
Yeah.
Times, years are passing by. That's absolutely the telltale sign that we're
Yeah.
not enjoying the moment and really making meaningful things. So I think all of us are guilty of that to one degree or another, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm the same. I learn a lot from watching my kids, and it's hard, as a parent, because sometimes you have to catch yourself because you'll be hurrying them to do something, and when I stop to think about it, and I mean, look, I've got to get better at this, but when you stop to think about it, it's like, what am I actually hurrying them for? Like in your example, why am I hurrying them to the corner to get over the road quicker? Because we're not going anywhere in particular. Like we've got plenty of time to get to school. So why does it have to be like now and super fast? And come on, and don't look at the flowers. Just keep rolling along. And I think that that's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
where you're like, no, you know what, you'll miss out on, and you don't take that in. You don't. The moment never stays with you. I mean, I talk a lot about a concept called digital amnesia, which people can Google if they're interested in reading about it. Look, it's an interesting phenomenon that there's been a lot of like actual academic research done on it, and I think it's a reliance on smartphone devices to store physical memories for us instead of keeping them in our heads where they should be. And we were talking before around parenting, and people take a lot of photos of their kids, and instead of being present in the moment, they're more interested in taking a photo. Or I see it in art galleries all the time. You'll walk into a space and take a photo, and you think, well, why would you take a photo when you can get a better photo online if that's what you want? If you're just taking, I mean, I understand taking a photo of yourself in the space, but taking a photo of the work itself, I mean, it's maybe a little bit redundant, but it's to store the memory of having been there. And I often ask when I'm talking at events, I'll ask for a show of hands of who knows their partner's mobile phone number, and lots of people don't. It's just automatically stored in the device, and that kind of adds to what we were talking about before in terms of that reliance on your device, or that that huge sort of fear of being away from your phone because your memory is in there, and there's no point keeping those memories in there. And I'm sure that we're all the same. You flick back through 2 3 months ago, and you're like, oh, I'd forgotten about doing that because I wasn't there. I didn't break that autopilot lifestyle to sort of I knew that my sort of my rote behavior now has become take photos of this because you need to remember that you did it, and that's that's an interesting and somewhat sad state of affairs. So look, I think that from a work point of view, we try and disrupt that. We try and create more physical experiences. And that's what I do in terms of, in the art gallery or the mental health project or all of those different areas. It's about making people sort of realize that the tangible experiences outside that are more important. And they will help you more. They'll resonate with more. They'll live with you. They'll kind of heal you, and it'll allow you to sort of create more space in the world to, like you said before, to stop and look at that bug that your kids pointing out, and then have that memory of having done that with them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think it's something that almost starts with education, where you are just trying to everything's oriented around the next test, and you do the test, you take the test, and immediately everything that you've learned for the test is gone,
Yeah.
because you're actually trying to fill your brain with what's coming up for the next test. So it is definitely something that is prevalent for everyone and in every age almost. In your field, what would you say are some of the most necessary transferable skills that someone would need to succeed?
Uh, I think you need to be inquisitive. You need to be, I guess you need to be sort of very sort of wide in your scope in terms of how you look at the world, open to lots of different things, comfortable and being uncomfortable, that sort of stuff. Because you need to be able to scan and see what's out there to then be able to lock onto it and focus on what's going to have the best sort of return or change for your business or brand. Because I think that sort of operating in ambiguity is a key transferable skill across all the different, regardless of where you're going to be operating, because you're going to often be brought into a situation where someone will say something like, I know something's not right, but I don't quite know what it is and I don't quite know how to fix it. And there's a concept called adjacent possibilities or adjacent possibles, and it's looking at how if you start people off in too controlled a manner, then it sort of limits how broad they can look. So if your solution is to find a better way to sell insurance, then you might end up starting pushing people down. Or we've got to build an app, or we've got to do a new website, rather than sort of taking a step back and trying to be really broad in your approach in terms of like, well, what actually are people wanting to do? How are they trying to achieve this? What's the real core problem that they're trying to solve? Because I think if you're more broad in your sort of approach and you're comfortable sitting in that ambiguous space a bit longer, you'll find those adjacent things that you might not have considered if you just start running with like, well, I'll just make a straight up app that makes it easy to do it. It allows you to sort of create
Okay.
those new experiences.
I'm going to double down and say, if someone takes that and agrees, but then wants to enhance their skills in that area, they want to become more curious, they want to become more comfortable with uncertainty. Any suggestions or ways in which they might be able to sharpen that skill?
Yeah, I think that it's the ability to really read and understand insights and research. I mean, because that's where you're going to find that. So the ability, again, to sit in that research and to ask the consumers, to conduct the interviews. It's I mean, it's a core tenet of human-centered design to be able to look into that space and to define what that problem is and to really unpack what the true issue is. So I'd probably look into that sort of area, whether you look at human-centered
Okay.
design as a concept or just insights in general, being able to really read it, not just necessarily looking at the exec summary or the sort of the slide at the top that gives you the key stats, but to really sort of dig into that data that you've got, whatever that is in your business, and find that opportunity and then back it, even if it's a bit different or it's a bit out there. I think that's the key.
Yeah. Okay, well, on that note, I think we're pretty much out of time, Damien. Thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
sharing all of your insights and your thoughts around this area that I think covers everybody, no matter their field, just people in this modern digital era. If people would like to look up the gallery or find you online, what would be the best way to get in touch?
They can look up DamianMadden.com or singlepiecegallery.com, and I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn, and it's easy ways to find it out.
All right. If you've got a rock star name like Damian Madden, you get the .com. I get it. I get it. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Damian.
Gordon. Appreciate it.
And thanks to everybody for listening and watching for this episode of the Get Stuff Done podcast. Let's get stuff done.